back around the Bonfire. It's the show doing their introduction for a second time. Life's always weird when we have guests and when we do interviews, but it's John and Tim, another episode here. We'll have a special guest later on. Tim, Wednesday evening, how are we feeling? Tough loss yesterday.
So, magic of podcasts, we actually recorded the second segment first. And it's a really weird, hard life for you, John. We just were talking to Dax McCarty about soccer and the Fire. It's really basically the same thing as working in a coal mine. You know what? But you do that twice a week all the time anyways, so.
Yeah, sometimes more. No,
not when either of us can avoid it.
In a moment, we're going to talk some news, a little bit of Chicago Fire football, some things happening, maybe our own more biased reactions, and then we'll switch over to an awesome conversation with Dax McCarty, former Chicago Fire midfielder and now current MLS Apple TV match analyst, to talk the game against Monterrey and a pretty brief but I think perfectly apt description of what to expect in Seattle this week. Tim, let's kick it off with the big story we've kicked around but haven't really talked about. Greg Berhalter. Once again, Andrew Wiebe just has a way of words, apparently, that Greg Berhalter wants to tell him anything and everything about Mbekazeli and Bokazi. But the aforementioned South African center back may not be done for the year, as it turns out. The team hopeful they can have him back. I don't know that he gave a specific timeline. There's not one I've seen, but what have you heard as you keep your ear to the ground here?
No, I mean, Greg has been pretty direct about it. He said on Apple TV that there is a possibility that Mbekazi could be back at some point this season, which is not what we heard before. I mean, these things do change based on just the way that injuries are progressing, and sometimes you get second opinions, sometimes you get more imaging. One of the difficulties from talking to some medical people around these things is, depending on the nature of the injury, and how much swelling there is, even the best imaging in the world, initially, it's not clear what's really going on biologically. And so you start making some assumptions and making plans for what you're going to do based on what you think it is. But if the swelling goes down and you're able to re-image it, which the nice thing about having, a billionaire owner and, you being a very important piece of the machine that he spent hundreds of millions of dollars for, is that you will get that opportunity for a second image if anyone on the medical staff thinks it would be useful, and you can then kind of reassess. And I don't know that that's exactly what happened here, but it sounds like it's that or something like it. Now, possibility he will be back does not mean he's going to be back in time for the Fire's next home game in Inter Miami, or in time even for the decision day matchup in early November, right? Like, it could be he could be available for the playoffs, or we're going to wait and see, and it could be he's there if we need him in an absolute pinch, but it's, it would be in a case of emergency thing in the playoffs, and we don't want to risk re-injury, which would be 100%, I think, the right call either way, with both what he can do as well as just, what his future is.
Yeah, I don't really love saying this publicly for no other reason than there was a lot of people who knew things even, saying Andre Franco would be back after the World Cup. Andre Franco does not appear to be any closer to being back than he was before the World Cup. I mean, he's in Chicago, right? He
will be back after the World Cup.
Immediately following the World Cup?
No, it's 2027 is after the World Cup. If he's back in 2035, it's after the World Cup.
At one point, that is literally what I said, and I was told I was being a hater. But just to say, there are unknown setbacks that you could face, especially with a soft tissue injury, which is what Bokazi has, right? A potentially torn, though we don't know the grade of the tear, muscle in his thigh. Like, in terms of predicting outcomes, this is nearly impossible.
Yeah, exactly.
Because we know nothing, I should say.
And even then, so like the best physicians with all the information can't make exact predictions on these things, and we are none of those things. So, I think we just take it as a positive. I think we can take it as a positive, right? That he may be back. Now, I think that may complicate, a little bit of the planning around last-minute roster additions, but we will see. And actually, that kind of probably gets you into the next thing you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, exactly, Tim. That is, look, it's a roster acquisition. We talk about it a little bit with Dax. That I got to be honest, man. We talked about it a little bit. I don't understand. There are some reports coming out of Greece today, which you would not be, thought unsmart for not understanding why these reports are coming out of Greece. But Chicago Fire have made an offer, and it is potentially close to going through for Inter Miami defender Noah Allen. typically a left back, has played as a left center back at times. Obviously, American-born, so would not require an international slot. And given that he's already here, he's a guy, I think as you said earlier, could be signed on Thursday and play on Friday kind of thing. Tim, 30,000 feet, what can you tell us about where the deal is at? And then also, I would welcome your thoughts on it because I don't think mine are the most positive.
I'm being told that it's close to happening. Not that it's official or anything like that, but I believe that it will happen. And one thing we've seen from Inter Miami is they've been willing to make a ton of moves pretty quickly, and get rid of pieces that have been mainstays on the squad to try to bring in another one of Messi's friends that will be the person that fixes absolutely everything on that roster. And with that having been said, I think Noah Allen's a good player. I think that he's a strong wingback, teammate of Georgios Koutsias on the Greek U21s, which is probably the weirdest thing, the last thing you'd expect from a guy named Noah Allen, but that's the world we live in. But it doesn't. It feels weird to me because it's not a position of need for the Fire, and we talked about this in a little bit with Dax, but I don't. And you brought this up. I don't know if that means Radojevic is going. I don't have any indication that that's the case. He has played decently, but he hasn't exactly stood out a ton. And I don't know if that means somebody else is going. It will not be Andrew Gutman, who's in Chicago for the long haul, but
just signed an extension.
Well, but sometimes players sign extensions, and with the understanding that it helps facilitate the trade, right? And that can be part of it. But
would they have held an Andrew Gutman day if they were trading Andrew Gutman, Tim?
I think that sometimes, not saying this about the Fire, but every large organization gets ridiculously uncoordinated at certain points. So
fair. Look, I think the only way, to me at least, that something like this makes sense, and said it there, is if you are just kind of trying to play, what's the word? I don't know. The game where you mix up all the cards. It's unless you're just trying to move some pieces, move around your deck chairs. I don't know if that's the phrase. And it's okay, well, if we sign Noah Allen to a senior deal and we can sell Victor Radojevic, who I don't think is on a U22 anymore. I'm having trouble keeping track of who they've moved off of those deals. He is not. He is.
He's not. But it doesn't ultimately matter.
But ultimately, what you're clearing
moves, right?
up is an international roster slot, right? So if you are bringing in Noah Allen to move off of Victor Radojevic, even just to potentially loan him to Lugano or something like that, to clear up an international slot, okay. Otherwise, I don't know how you expect 5'8" Noah Allen to play center back. And look, I think he's a fine player. I have no issues in theory of just acquiring Noah Allen in a vacuum. I don't understand why this team would do it at this point unless they were planning on making an additional move when you already have arguably the best left back in the league. A guy who you signed on a U22 deal as a backup, and then arguably one of the better swing fullbacks in the league in Jonathan Dean, unless you think he's the starter at right back. I don't know. It just feels very weird. It doesn't really fill a hole. It's just another guy eating cap space. And assuming it's a cash for it doesn't really matter, but it's still just odd. It's still just odd.
There's a lot of questions around it, right? And what are the Fire getting back in return? Now, it could be that the Fire are, potentially looking at something that's not a cash for. It could be some kind of another roster move. We know that Inter Miami has, liked hoarding GAM and then finding, creative ways of using it. That's a possibility. Who knows? But I think we've kind of said enough about this. He's a good player. I'm not sure that it's the move the Fire need to make, and I'm not sure that it addresses any of the Fire's core needs, which are center back depth, which I know is kind of a meme in MLS, but the Fire are stretched at that position, and reinforcement in the midfield.
They're just clearing space so they can go get Miles Robinson from Cincinnati, Tim. Look, the other name,
the third DP slot. That's the best way to use it.
The other name that popped up here, Anzor Mekvash. Dang it, every time. I swear I was going to get it. Mekvabishvili, Anzor Mekvabishvili, a Georgian central midfielder currently playing in the Superliga of Romania, Universitatea Craiova. From all accounts, kind of seems like a very similar profile to Anton Saletros in a lot of ways. Maybe a little less gifted with the ball at his feet, likes to play a little more direct. Those reports all coming out of Eastern Europe, so it's a little bit up in the air. Seems like it would be in a similar range to the reported dollars for Noah Allen in that $2.5 million, which would make this probably a TAM signing. Again, just something that, a good player is a good player, and you want to have good players, but doesn't seem to be what the Fire need at the moment, especially with a shortage of international roster slots.
Yeah, they're another interesting move, right? And I don't think, again, I think the Fire's key need is someone that's further up the pitch than where he plays primarily. So, I don't know. And it does that mean now if the Fire are making that as many moves as I think they're trying to make, it will mean that there will have to be departures, and I don't have a good sense of exactly what those moves will be. So, it could be that if you have to bring him in because you're sending someone away, and it just essentially becomes you're trying to upgrade while also sending a player away at a position. So that could be it.
One thing I'm curious your thoughts on here. We've heard a lot of talk about a potential creative midfielder. Potentially, Greg Berhalter alluding to the fact that they have a designated player lined up. They're just deciding if they want to pull the trigger on it. One thing pointed out to me, shout out Connor, he's the guy that's always pulling out random South American players on Twitter. He pointed out, look, this is a guy who does play in some ways similarly to how Andre Franco played, which was dropping deep into the lines and kind of orchestrating play from the back. So interesting in that respect, and maybe the answer is they're looking for a more traditional number 10, and Andre Franco gets relegated to a bench role even upon his return. So yeah, just interesting. I think just a lot of things to chew on. Tim, I guess while we're here, that was alluded to by Greg Berhalter, this idea that they are ready to pull the trigger on another designated player, just making up their minds. Anything you can offer there, or any thoughts you might want to provide?
I mean, I think I've said what I think about the profile. I am not 100% sure who the prime targets are at this point. I think it's going to be interesting because, it's another thing we talked about in a second, so we should maybe just get into that. But with Dax is the MLS roster window is open later than it is in Europe at this point, and so I think a lot of players that were looking for a move and did not get one will suddenly become available, and that may make a number of players interested in MLS in ways that they were not before. No guarantees that will be the case, though, because something we've seen from some guys is there's guys that are open to the move, and then there's people that just for one reason or another would like to stay in Europe, which is understandable, right? Not wanting to move continents if you got a family, a life set up somewhere, move farther away from family and friends and support structures. But we're going to get empirical data on that really soon.
Yeah, well put. I mean, look, you mentioned there number of moves. There would need to be a number of outgoing as well, and we're kind of running out of time to get those outgoing moves done with the way the transfer windows are set up. I guess, to that end, curious, you mentioned there could be a number. I don't know if you're putting a value on that, or it's more just we expect a flurry of moves as thing gets late here.
There could be as many as 3 or 4 moves in the work. I would not at all think that many will happen. I would say that it's much more likely that it's going to be in the 1 or 2 moves range, which could still involve the Fire sending someone out, right? So yeah, I think we have to, again, we'll just have to see how it all shakes out. I think it's interesting with Lewandowski here, right? Because that puts sort of he is here, he is not getting younger, he just turned 38, and so you want to win hardware while he's here, and that means you don't want to start hoarding GAM to try to make moves later, right? Yeah,
no, well put. Look, it's going to be a week of waiting, a week of watching, a week of frantically searching Chicago Fire on Twitter and seeing what random country is talking about sending a player here. It's tough to say, but it's going to be a fun week. We'll say it that. Chicago Fire also heading to Seattle this weekend. Tim, before we go and send to our conversation with Dax, do you want to give me your prediction and your spark? Who you got? Who's your spark?
I'm going to say 3-1 for the Fire and Philip Zinkernagel.
Boo.
Just because.
Boo.
Was that going to be your prediction?
Boo.
Yeah.
No. I'm going to say very similar. I'm going to say 3-0. I joked to Dax, this is very similar to when the Fire faced Sporting Kansas City. It's Dejan Joveljic and a bunch of guys. So I say 3-0 Fire, and I'm going to go Andrew Gutman. I feel like we're just due for another awesome Andrew Gutman game. I think a little bit of frustration on his end from how that game against Monterrey went with his performance. So we'll go Andrew Gutman. We'll send you over to the conversation with Dax McCarty from here, and then we'll be back just to wrap up. We'll go whoosh. Hello and welcome back around the Bonfire. It's the show that didn't really like Leagues Cup anyway. Who wants to be there? It's Tim and John back, another episode, but yet another special guest. It feels like we're getting to more and more these days. Joined today by former Chicago Fire midfielder and current MLS match analyst for Apple TV, Dax McCarty. Dax, thank you so much for being here, man. It's great to have you.
Thanks for having me, guys. I really enjoyed the novelty of being back at SeatGeek, right? And it was my first time back since I had left the Fire, and I didn't appreciate the hour drive in traffic, which I was so accustomed to. But driving by the Portillos on the way to the stadium and seeing the bubble and the dome, and seeing the tailgating happening in the parking lot and walking back in through the stadium, man, it was a little nostalgic. I got to be honest, I enjoyed it.
Novelty and nostalgia. That's all you can rely on when you're going out.
And I'm wearing my Chicago hat for you guys.
Awesome. Love it. Yeah. I'll just say that place has not exactly aged like wine. And has not gotten better since they haven't had a primary tenant, but hey, new home on the horizon. So
Tim, for the millionth time, I'm going to ask you to stop disrespecting the Chicago Hounds. Okay. They exist. They play a number of games there a year. Apparently they won all of them this year. Shout out the Hounds. It's funny, the hour traffic. It's like every so often I have to explain to my wife, yes, I know we live 6 miles from the stadium. It still is worse getting to there than going to Soldier Field. Like it's unreasonable, but hey, we're glad to have you here today. It was fun to hear you on the call last night. We'll talk a little bit of Chicago Fire and Monterrey, the homecoming of Hugo Cuypers, and maybe a little bit of Seattle Sounders this weekend.
Sure.
Dex, let's kind of kick this off. I think where everybody's eyes have been pointing for, 35 days now, right about there, 5 weeks or so. It was not the worst night, but potentially not the best night, let's say, for Robert Lewandowski. And I'm curious, kind of in preparation for this game and then watching it live last night, kind of where you land on the situation with Robert, as it were, and how the team has played with him.
Well, I think Robert Lewandowski has been really good for the Fire for the most part. Everything that has come out of that locker room, and specifically from him, specifically from Greg Berhalter, has been really positive. Everyone effusive in their praise of Robert, which it's not a surprise if you had followed his career and you knew the player that he was and the person that he was. That's exactly what you were going to get. Pretty much, I would think the ideal prototypical designated player signing. And of course, would you love him to be 5 years younger? Of course. But at the end of the day, he's one of the best strikers of the last 100 years. And he was still playing at a high level, winning La Liga, challenging for a Champions League at Barcelona. So I would still argue that it's a coup for the Chicago Fire to be able to get him. And I think that because of the fact that you had to lose Hugo Cuypers in order to do it, that might make the leash a little bit shorter for people's patience for what they see from him. And I think he's been phenomenal in certain games. I think he's been a little bit anonymous in other games. And I thought that last night, his performance was skewed more towards the anonymous, not good enough from a world superstar performance that I wanted to see more of. And so I will be very measured and balanced because I don't think it's all his fault. But I also have a sneaking suspicion that he feels the need to do more because the Chicago Fire, because of how Greg Berhalter set up his team throughout Leagues Cup. And so Greg has come a long way in terms of trusting, I think, the depth on this team. I think we saw that throughout Leagues Cup. A lot of depth pieces and younger players stepped up and played important roles. And you had 3 good wins. And the only team in MLS to win all 3 of their group stage games to get them to this point. And so I thought it was an overwhelmingly positive tournament for the Fire overall. But I said it on pregame. I said this and I meant it. And sorry, this is going to be a really long-winded answer on Robert Lewandowski, but I'll bake all of it into kind of what I said and my feelings around the club. I was able to do a little tour of the training facility in the morning before the game. World class. I was able to go by where the stadium site is going to be. Best in MLS in terms of location, downtown, right by the river. You're going to be able to take river taxis to the game. And I won't get into the parking situation for people coming from the suburbs. I don't want it to rankle any feathers, but obviously not ideal. But again, the fact that you are so close to downtown, it's going to be the crown jewel of Major League Soccer, along with NYCFC's new stadium. The infrastructure and the commitment from Joe Mansueto is there, and it makes me jealous that I wasn't and am not a part of it now as a player, because they have everything they need. And now I described it as a sleeping giant last year, a resurgent powerhouse this year, and I think the Chicago Fire are on pace to sustain success for a really long time under Joe. And it has to be that way. Major League Soccer is better when their flagship clubs and the clubs in the big cities are relevant. And the Chicago Fire are relevant. I guarantee you that. Robert Lewandowski has to do his part, though. And specifically with his performance last night, he was far, far too eager to drop into midfield and try to make the game and try to get on the ball and try to hold the ball up. And it looked at times almost like a diamond, with three defensive-minded number 8 midfielders, with Jay Davila sitting at the base of the diamond, Lewandowski trying to get on the ball in between the lines and drag the center backs out. And the idea was Puso Dite-Jean, Robert Zinkernagel, you test the depth and you make runs in behind. And it was really effective for 20 minutes because the Fire's counter press and their repress high up the field was extremely effective. As that started to become less and less effective, Robert Lewandowski kept dropping. And so even when the Fire broke into the final third, they didn't have any reference point in the box. Oftentimes, Puso Dite-Jean was the only guy in the box. And I'm just thinking, that's not a recipe for being dangerous and scoring goals. And so Robert Lewandowski's such a good player. He's such a brilliant footballer that he can do so much. And honestly, he does way more at a higher level than Hugo Cuypers does, even though I'm a big fan of Hugo Cuypers. But Hugo Cuypers knew that when he dropped and held the ball up, he would set the ball off, and then he didn't need another touch. It was a dead sprint into the box. Like, that was where he needed to be to score goals. And he did that. Lewandowski, he really likes to combine and he likes to play make. And I think this maybe speaks to the tactical setup from Greg, and also maybe the lack of an out-and-out number 10, where you don't really have that creative presence, that he doesn't trust the team to be able to get him the ball in those dangerous positions. So that's a little unfair. He scored 4 goals in 9 or 10 games. Probably want a little bit more of a return from that, but you have to be in the box to score goals. I didn't think Lewandowski was sharp last night. His turnover led to the game-winning goal, okay? And so I'm a huge fan, but I'm also an analyst, and I'll never lie to anyone and beat around the bush. He is the second or third highest paid player in the league. You have to acknowledge he didn't have his best game. That's okay. He will continue to get better. I thought the Fire in general just weren't really up for it. It was a cascade effect of a number of different things. Monterrey was the deserved winner, and I think you have to accept that. And even though it comes with disappointment, you have to accept that as a Fire fan.
Yeah, and I think Greg, after the game, was clear he wasn't happy with the effort he saw from a number of people. But I think looking big picture, though, like, they had the win over Cruz Azul. They lost to Monterrey, both by a 2-1 score, one their way, one not. So, between that and other performances we've seen, where I kind of am with the team is it feels like they are a very good team, but are missing a piece or two away from being a truly elite team, of being where, like, Vancouver or Nashville are this season. And I don't know if you feel like that's fair. Yeah.
I feel like that's absolutely fair, and I agree 100%.
And the window's open for a little bit under a week from when we're going to be releasing this. So, like, and the Fire are planning on making moves. I'm not 100% sure if all of them are going to come through or not, but it seems like, especially with Andre Franco hurt, that, like, that number 10 position has just been, seeing like Greg has tried to play, like, almost do whatever he can to play without all year. And I think that it kind of catches up to them, especially in big games like this.
Yeah, it does. And I think when you look at how he set up, even with how Almeida set up, there was a lot of mutual respect there between the managers of the fact that they're oftentimes this year, Monterrey set up with 3 center backs, and they put Tecatito Corona and Luca Orellano as wing backs. And then you had Orbelin Pineda, and then you had they're really Ocampos and Diego Rossi and Cuypers on the field all together, which is so attack-minded and so aggressive. And the fact that Almeida is like, I probably can't do that against the Fire. And the fact that Greg, he wanted to start more with 3 mobile box-to-box midfielders with Dite-Jean sitting at the base of that I think speaks to the respect Greg had for Almeida and the quality that Monterrey had. But when Robin Lod came onto the field, he made a difference. And it was obvious that he helped Robert Lewandowski stay a little bit higher up the field. And it still wasn't dangerous. But when Robin Lod at least gets on the ball in between the lines, he tries to play forward and tries to pick a pass forward. A big issue for the Fire for the majority of the game is that Andrew Gutman couldn't get up the field. They had the wrong balance there, and Gutman was a little bit pinned back by the rotations from Diego Rossi and Ocampos. And there were times in the first half where Monterrey got in behind Gutman, and Jack Elliott was a little bit slow to step and cover that space in behind. And so that was where Monterrey was pretty dangerous in that first half. And so you had to get the balance right. And when Chicago had to be more aggressive, guess what the answer is? Gutman being your most dangerous attacking player, getting into the final third, getting a brilliant assist. Zinkernagel also could have had another one on a Gutman cross that he didn't keep on frame. So the Fire, they're at this place where I do think they can compete with the best teams in the league. But you're right. I think they need a couple of pieces. Andre Franco, a little bit of secrecy around what's really going on with him. I think he's on the mend, and I do think he'll be available at some point for the Fire this year, barring any setbacks. But can you rely on that? Will he be 90 minutes fit? Will he be the same player he was last year before the injury? I think if you're the Chicago Fire, there's some big priorities here. You're not getting enough out of Jonathan Bamba. Puso Dite John has passed him on the depth chart, and he's not even one of your first subs off the bench. I think you have to find a way to offload that contract and to try to maybe move him on. I don't know if that's been reported or not. I like him. I think he's a good player, but when for a designated player, you need more production. Full stop, bottom line. And then a number 10 would go a long way towards, I think, helping some of the creative issues that the Fire have. I would like to see them have a little bit more depth at center back with Mbakazi and the questions surrounding him. Cups going on loan. You only have 3 first-team center backs. What happens if Mbakazi can't return at the end of the year? That would worry me a little bit if I was a Fire fan. So a number 10 and maybe some defensive depth, and maybe try to bring in a winger if you can. I mean, I know it's a lot to do with only a week left in the window, but that's kind of the way I see the Fire. I see them challenging for MLS Cup, no question about it. I would like to see them get at least one big move over the line before the window's up.
Yeah, I mean, and it's been rumored, and I think it may actually be official by this point. I hear that it's pretty close that Noah Allen is going to be moving to the Fire, so that's a defender,
wow.
Not necessarily like a straight out-and-out center back, but he has played there in a back three.
That's a great move. That's all. If that comes through, I like Noah Allen a lot. I think he can thrive as he's a left back. He can be a left center back. He's a great depth piece, good pace. I mean, Inter Miami's been a nightmare defensively, but I don't necessarily blame their defenders all that much.
It's a lot of it's just some stuff like that and goalkeeping too.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, so there are moves that it looks like the Fire are trying to make. I don't know if they'll all get over the line. Like that one looks like it's pretty solid, and being in the league, I think helps because you can, say it on Thursday and he shows up on Friday. But some of the international moves, we'll see how much it really matters with the window being open later than it is in Europe. If there's like a lot of, kind of like after the buzzer in Europe deadline deals happening this year.
Yeah, well, I think that's a good thing that the window's open a little bit later. I think you're going to see a lot of movement towards the end of the window. I mean, there are a lot of moving parts with where MLS is right now. With teams that can challenge for trophies right now, how do you structure contracts going into the sprint season? What moves do you make? Like, are you a Sporting Kansas City where you're just, again, blowing it up again and totally revamping everything and off-selling, it's a total rebuild for another year? Or are you a Fire team that needs to tweak and just all you need is just I think they just need a big difference maker. I think they need a little bit more depth on that back line, which I think Noah Allen would go a long way towards addressing. And then to be honest, they're a really well-balanced team. I don't see a lot of issues with the Fire, but when you play big games, the margins are really thin. And a big issue, which I'm glad Greg Berhalter addressed it in his postgame last night, the Fire can't be giving up goals off set pieces as regularly as they are. I was going through their lineup, and I'm like, am I crazy, or do they have 5 6-footers or taller in their lineup? And they do. It's like Lewandowski and Jack Elliott and Waterman and Jay Davila. Like, Soletros is a big guy. Like, you cannot be conceding that goal at the end of the first half if you're the Fire. That is way too simple. It's way too soft. Jack Elliott is fantastic on attacking set pieces. He got exposed a little bit on that first one, but it's really little things like that where the Fire are either going to challenge for a trophy this year, an MLS Cup, or they're going to continue to concede soft set piece goals and not. So that's kind of the difference maker for me.
Interestingly, go ahead, Tim.
Well, I think a lot of it, unfortunately, has been at Jack Elliott's feet. Like, it was his birthday yesterday. It was, just not a good outing for him. But it's a number of times, like, you can beat the Fire in the air, and it's frequently on that side. Ironically, it was less of an issue with Imbo Kazian, who was the one center back the Fire have that's not, like, 7 feet tall.
He's an athletic specimen. I love watching him play, man.
And Greg let us know that he may be back at some point this season, which would be phenomenal, because before we were told that there was basically no hope. But I that is a place where the Fire, I think, do need to figure something out. Like, I don't know if it's reinforcement. I don't know if it's...
Yeah. Noah Allen won't help you there with the set piece thing.
Well, look, you look across that back line, you can argue that Jack Elliott is the worst in the air of those four guys when you think Jonathan Dean, Joel Waterman, and Andrew Gutman are all guys who can,
sure,
relative to their height, I suppose, right? Yeah. You peaked on a couple things that I've been interested in throughout the season. I'd love to hear your thoughts on. You mentioned there the idea of Noah Allen, generally a good player. I think we're all fine with the idea of Noah Allen as somebody who plays soccer professionally. I don't know that it makes a ton of sense for what the Fire need unless you are planning on potentially offloading a guy like Viktor Radojevic at that kind of, backup left back and let Noah do a little bit of both. But also a guy who doesn't feel the need, right? He doesn't exactly play a super athletic brand of football. I'm curious. One of the things we said mid-year when the Lewandowski stuff kind of picked up was you're taking a thing that is working really well, right? You're still in contention for the Supporters' Shield. Tough stretch to end the year or to end the first half of the season, but overall, one of the 5 best teams in MLS. And you're kind of blowing it up and remaking it on the fly, in large part because whether it's better or worse, Robert Lewandowski plays a very different style of football than Hugo Cuypers does, right? They have different strengths, different weaknesses. And it does feel a little bit now as we're looking, with a week left in the window, it's a deadline-driven business, however you want to phrase it, right? It does feel a little bit like you're rebuilding on the fly with a team that was already really good, as opposed to just plugging in pieces that may have just taken the team to the next level. And I know Hugo Cuypers asks to leave. They weren't necessarily expecting that. We could argue about whether that's, they should have been. But I'm just curious, does any of that kind of ring true for you as you watch this team going into the second half? It's still hypothetically in contention, right, for a Supporters' Shield, but far off.
It does ring true, no question about it. You are taking a big swing, but I would also argue that it's Robert Lewandowski. If he is available and if he wants to sign for your team and he is still motivated and relatively good fitness level, you have to sign him. There's just no world in which it doesn't make sense to bring in a player like that, both because he will score goals and both because he's a commercial dynamo in the Chicago area. So again, there needs to be, I think, a lot of different factors that make sense, but it's a no-brainer, guys. It's a no-brainer. And I personally would have loved to see it work with both Cuypers and Lewandowski. I think this is one of those situations that it's very rare that I think it just makes the most sense and works for all parties involved to just kind of see, like, how it played out was kind of how it was supposed to play out in the best for all parties involved. Cuypers gets one more big payday. He goes to a contender to win trophies in Liga MX, right? The Fire bring in a world superstar who, he's on his last legs, but again, like, to me, it was a no-brainer to bring him in. Now, is it going to be a challenge for Greg Berhalter? Yeah, of course. Like, there's no question you are going to have to kind of readjust some of the ways that you play. And you can see the seeds being planted a little bit with if Lewandowski is dropping into midfield. Puso Dite-John is a player that I didn't know much about going into the season, and he's just really grown on me throughout the season. I mean, Greg Berhalter described him as fearless. He's keeping Jonathan Bamba on the bench and Robin Lod on the bench. And I know Lod's not really a winger, but again, like, Dite-John has been really good, and that is a really good signing, and that is a really good, bright signing for the future. But even for the now, he's playing well. You have to have a little bit more than just him testing the depth of a backline if Lewandowski's not going to do that. And so, again, you said it, Cuypers and Lewandowski, different strengths, different weaknesses. I would argue that Lewandowski is a more complete player, no question about it. But he also has to find ways to be in the box more. Again, I said it at the top of the show. You don't bring Robert Lewandowski in to make the game. Like, I saw so many opportunities and so many moments where he was just in the center circle, dropping deep. His hold-up play was excellent. By the way, the CF Monterrey tactics with him were absurd. I thought the referee should have pulled out a yellow card way earlier than he did with the amount of tactical fouls that were happening. But again, like, that is a tactic that's going to be used to kind of stop him. But he has to be in the box more. It's unacceptable for a player of his caliber and a team as good as the Chicago Fire to not have their star striker get even one shot. I don't think he had one shot on goal. I don't even think he had a shot. I would be shocked if he had more than 5 touches in the box. That can't happen.
No touches in the box in that one.
That's egregious. It can't. That fundamentally cannot happen, and that is a twofold issue. Greg Berhalter, he's got to have the backbone to say, "Hey, Robert, stay higher up the field. It's my job to be able to put players on the field and set the team up tactically to be able to create chances for you." Because if you remember him, even at Bayern Munich and even at Barcelona, he could score. He scores goals in a myriad of different ways, but he isn't like a make my own shot type of striker. Especially now in the latter stages of his career, he needs service. He needs people to be on the same page. He needs to be able to combine with people. He needs someone to come underneath him. Like, I like Sergio Orahel. I really like Soletros, and I like Jay Davila, but like, are they the types of players that are going to be able to combine with him and find him facing forward so he can run at a back line or get service into the box? Like, Gutman and Jonathan Dean for sure did not have enough service into the box. It just didn't happen near enough. And so that's a Greg Berhalter problem. They will solve it. I trust Greg. Every guy, I think the fan base also needs a little bit of patience, right? Like, think about where you guys were before Greg came in. Think about the steps that you took last year and think about the steps that you are taking this year. It doesn't happen overnight, but I'm convinced that Greg will figure it out. Greg Berhalter, number 9, is always going to be in contention for the Golden Boot. Always. Full stop. It will happen. There's a little pain, I think, still from Cuypers and how good he was and how great of a guy he is and how great of a teammate he was and how beloved he was. That's fine. Robert Lewandowski is going to be just fine.
Yeah.
Dex,
he will not be the first striker that has not performed under Greg Berhalter.
Exactly.
And if he is, we've got some real issues. One last thing I want to probe on about the Monterrey matchup, and then maybe we can talk a little bit of Seattle. I know you got to get out of here at some point. This was kind of in talking with folks last night after the game, and I'll maybe ask you to put your fan hat on a little bit for this one. It was very, well, it's Monterrey, right? What are you going to do? That's one of the best teams in North America. So what? Like, you lost, sucks, but that's life. And I found myself almost bashing my head against the wall a little bit because, look, from the day he joined, right, from the day he signed his contract, the words out of Greg Berhalter's mouth were, we want to be one of the best teams on the continent. We want to be a powerhouse of North America. And while I wouldn't say the club is there, right, I would say they're comfortably a top, we'll say generous and say 6 team in MLS, right? I think they are one of the 3 best teams in the Eastern Conference, no doubt. And the West is a little odd, so we could maybe have a team or 2 ahead of them outside of Vancouver and maybe LAFC. But like, I feel like this is almost a perspective issue to what you said of you were here during a part of that dark time. I think some people are still in that dark time, and it's like it almost feels like, no, I think you should expect more out of this team than that result. Where I know 2-1, you're losing on a worldie of a goal from Orbelin Pineda, but it did feel like Monterrey was the better team for 85% of that match, really outside the first 20-25 minutes, as you guys talked about on the broadcast.
Yeah, they were. Monterrey was the better team. They deserved to win. Greg was what I appreciate about Greg is that he's not going to sugarcoat anything. He's not going to sit up there in the press conference and lie to you and be like, "Oh, we deserve better. We should have won." No, he said the better team won and deserved to win the game. We've got to improve, and that the Fire will be better off for that game and that performance. Guys, it's not off. Like, CF Monterrey, you look at their front 6. All 6 of those players would be designated players in Major League Soccer. At some point, you just have to face the reality of what the situation is. And now, could the Fire have done some things a little bit differently in terms of challenging them a little bit more? Yes, of course. They could have. They didn't play very well. Like, the Fire, after the first 20 minutes, just didn't play very well. They were really loose, playing out of the back. They missed some simple passes. I thought Jay Davila was really hot and cold. Defensively, I thought he won a lot of tackles and balls, but he was just way too loose in possession. It's funny because on the Chicago Fire equalizer, Mauricio Pineda came into the game and he got his pocket picked way too easily by Ocampos, and then Ocampos egregiously turned the ball over, and so Pineda saves his blushes a little bit, but it was just too casual. And in the biggest games at the highest level, the Fire, they're going to have to take less touches, not more touches. They're going to have to be way more efficient and clean in their passing out of the back. I mean, it was just so choppy. I mean, even the second half, like before the Fire scored, I remember distinctly telling my co-commentator, Evan Weston, it is so choppy out of the back and so nervy and so unclear. Chris Brady gets on the ball. Every time the Fire passed it backwards, it was like a 50-50 clearance out to a fullback, where then Gutman has to try to control the ball, and then he's playing it backwards, and Monterrey can just press and press. And so the Fire didn't find the right balance between playing through pressure, being able to turn and play quickly against that chaotic man-v-man press, and then just go direct. When you go direct, who do you want to go direct to? Robert Lewandowski. You want to play it into his chest so he can hold it up and have runners off him. But when you play with the three more defensive-minded midfielders, you just don't have the right balance in midfield to try to, I think, break out of that. And so after the first 20 minutes, Monterrey had full control of the game. The Chicago Fire are going to be fine. I hope fans realize, after so much pain and suffering for 20 years, that you, like, genuinely, I say this with zero doubt in my mind, you are in for a period of however long Greg Berhalter's here and however long Joe Mansueto's owning this team, for at least sustained success for the next 10 years. I guarantee it. I guarantee it. They have the right people in the right positions. They have the infrastructure is better than 95% of teams in North America. And they have the right people. They have the right owner. That is where things for me are the differentiator, is ownership, being willing to do whatever it takes to win. I would be shocked if the Chicago Fire don't win a trophy in the next 18 months. Some trophy. I would be shocked. I know that it's a bold statement, but I think they will get it right. They are already a top 5 team in Major League Soccer right now. And yeah, you can lay an egg in big games. It happens. But to legitimize the project, you got to win trophies.
And that's basically the time that Robert Lewandowski is here. So like that's, I think, why you brought him in, right? Like he's potentially going to be gone before the new stadium opens, and so it's not necessarily about that. It's about getting hardware for the team for the first time in 20 plus years.
Exactly.
But hey, one of the upshots, I think, before we close this one out is, your record with the 2017 Fire of 10 games unbeaten is still safe for modern times. I think the Fire's overall record's like 11 from 98 when they didn't have draws. But yeah,
Veljko Paunovic masterclass, man. We were a good team. We were a good team in 2017. We were a very good team. I really, really enjoyed playing for that 2017 team. Me and Pano got off on a rocky foot, but we came to an understanding, obviously, as we got to know each other a little better. Still, it was a really big point of pride for me being able to captain the Chicago Fire. I mean, that's something that not many people get to say that they did. And I was thinking about walking out of that SeatGeek tunnel, and I was kind of doing a little bit of research, and it was like, ooh, Jeff Lorenowitz, Logan Paws, CJ Brown, who I saw at the training facility, Cuauhtemoc Blanco. I mean, are you kidding me? Peter Novak was more Soldier Field, but like just a who's who of just legends from the Fire. So again, like I wouldn't say the greatest 3 years of my career. I would have loved to do a little bit more when I was on the Fire and loved to give us, I think, a bigger chance of winning some trophy. But that 2017 team in that season was a lot of fun, and I hope fans remember that one.
I think they do. I think this is probably going to be, I can tell you, Matt, who's kind of the head honcho here, when I mentioned, I was like, I think Dax is going to come on the show. He was maybe the most excited I've ever seen him about anything. So, you just, that team and your time here, I think, still hold a special place with people. Dax, we'll let you go in a second here. Before we do, I would love to get just, 30 seconds on Dejan Joveljic heading up to Seattle. Brian Schmetzer has guaranteed he will start against the Chicago Fire on Saturday. Would love
that's the 11th guy they've got that's healthy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Would just love your 2 cents on kind of what you'd be looking at in that game. Were you on that call?
Yeah, I would look for a bounce back performance from the Fire. They're the better team. They have better players at this moment in time. The Seattle Sounders are going through, I think, the most difficult moment in their existence right now. I don't think that's even a question. I think Brian Schmetzer at times in some of his comments has kind of cut a defeated figure. But again, these things happen in Major League Soccer, but not to this extent. They've at certain points in the season been missing 6 to 8 starters and like cornerstones of their franchise. So it's unfair, I think, to expect Seattle to get results right now. But they had a really good result against FC Cincinnati, and they just needed to stop the bleeding. And they're going to be at home, and anytime they play at home, they are always a threat. And so I think this is a little bit of a banana peel situation for the Fire, coming off a really emotional game against Monterrey, could be in for a letdown. I'd love to see Greg Berhalter, barring any fitness issues, play his strongest team, show respect to the Sounders. I don't want to see any rotation. I want to see him put what he feels like is his best team on the field to go and win the game. Because guess what? The Fire, I still think they're absolutely in for a shout to overtake Inter Miami, especially with the form Inter Miami's in. I don't think anyone's catching Nashville from the East. Maybe Vancouver if Nashville slip up. But the Fire still can secure a top 2 position in the Eastern Conference. And so if you are a legitimate team, if you are one of the best teams in the league, you have to win this game. I don't care that it's on the road. That is my expectation for the Chicago Fire. I would be expecting the same out of Vancouver, Nashville, Inter Miami. I put them in the same category. A team like Seattle, who's really struggling, even though they have Dejan Joveljic on the field, that's fine. Dejan Joveljic on the field, Albert Rusnak is still a very good player. Like they are going to pose you some problems, but again, Greg knows better. He's not going to overlook them. I do expect a very strong team from the Fire, and I expect them to get 3 points.
Love that. Hard to disagree. We saw a similar setup when the Fire thumped Sporting Kansas City earlier in the year, which is
exactly,
Dejan Joveljic and a bunch of guys.
Yeah, exactly.
Dax, before we go, anything you want to point folks towards in terms of finding you or your work, or anything you'd like to promote while we have you?
No, just
a lot of us listen to the Journeyman as well, but
great. I love that. Yeah, some of our best listeners are Fire fans. They're awesome. Obviously, with Dan Gargan and Alan Gordon, some former Fire players, we've had a lot of fun with the pod. It's a passion project, right? Like we all have other jobs. We've all got like multiple kids running around the houses these days, and so I wish we could. I wish we could put more into it. I wish we could put more social clips out. I wish we could record more, but we really try our best to get one a week out. I think it's a great vibes podcast. I think it's a great podcast for like if you just want to hear different, personalities amongst former players. I think it's a really good podcast for insight into the different hijinks and funny things that happen in our lives now, but still with a modicum of decency in terms of how we analyze the league. But all the Apple TV stuff, I'm loving it. I do half studio, half color. It's been a really great year. I've really enjoyed it. I absolutely loved calling the game last night. It was, I think, personally, I'm growing a lot. It was probably my best performance in the booth. I have a high standard for myself, and I really love calling games with Evan Weston, my co-coms, and so I hope people enjoyed the call. Hopefully I keep improving and getting better, but this media stuff is kind of fun.
Yeah, I have to tell you, if I can fan out for 2 seconds, there was a moment early in June where I was like, oh, God, I love First Things First, but I'm going to have to watch Chris Broussard and Nick Wright talk about soccer for 2 months. And I was like, oh, it's Dax McCarty. Like, that's great. That's great.
Oh, guys,
it fit like a glove, man.
That was an experience of a lifetime, I tell you what. Those guys, and I agree with you. It's tough sometimes listening to non-soccer people really try their best to talk about soccer. They blew me away with their prep. And yeah, it sounded a little weird at times and whatever, but like guys, they prep harder than any people in media. They are so good. It's such a well done show. I was honored to be a part of it, and it was just so fun, honestly. So I appreciate you watching that.
I appreciate you being here. Tim, anything you want to get off your chest before we get out?
No, really appreciate both the time and the insight here. This has been great.
And we're back. Thank you once again to Dax McCarty for joining us and talking a little bit of Chicago Fire football. I do want to say before we wrap, a day of release, August 27th, on the Men in Red 97 YouTube channel. You'll be able to tune into Hot Takes Live, so make sure you do so and subscribe to YouTube. Turn on notifications so that you know it's going on, and you also know when the show goes up. With that, wherever you're listening, if you can go ahead and give us a like, a subscribe, a rate, 5 stars, thumbs up, whatever it is, it goes a long way in terms of improving the reach and helping us get where we'd like to be. You can stay tuned to menandred97.com for all the latest and greatest on Chicago Fire breaking news, analysis, opinions, and all other coverages you could possibly ask for. While you're there, go ahead and subscribe to the Hotline. It's our weekly newsletter that goes out on Mondays to keep you updated on the stories you might have missed and all the things we've done since then, including some fun analytics that you might not see anywhere else. And last but not least, for Tim, for our illustrious producer Austin, for Dax McCarty earlier on, thank you so much for joining us around the bonfire, and come on, you men in red.